2026 sees me travel the length and breadth of England to run a marathon per week in each of its 39 historic counties. Why? To raise funds for Tommy's, the charity that does incredible work to try to end the heartbreak of baby loss. I'll be joined each week by someone who has their own story of loss, their own rollercoaster journey, their own reason to be there. This podcast shares those stories in the hope that they can bring awareness to an often undiscussed topic and even, perhaps, a flicker of light in someone's darkness. You can follow the runs, the stories, and donate to the cause at marathonsformiracles.com. Enjoy.
Hello, welcome to week 13, Marathons for Miracles. Unlucky for some, not for me. It's my favourite number. I was born on the 13th. Yeah, 13 is good for me. And as Finn pointed out just before we came on, we are a third of the way through the challenge, which feels like a lot. That also means there's 2/3 of the way to go. So it depends if you're a cup half full, cup half empty kind of person. But very interesting week this week because we're going back to Cambridge, which is where Poppy, our first daughter, was born, but also where my wife Amy and I sort of experienced our miscarriage. So very close to home for us. And also we're speaking to Finn and running with Finn and his wife Rosie, who we know, friends of friends. So Finn was very early on to the challenge. I think I rang him when I had about 1 or 2 people recruited and accosted him for this. So been there from the outset. So Finn, welcome to the podcast and also welcome to the challenge, and thank you very much for being involved from pretty much day one.
No problem. Yeah, I think I got a WhatsApp from you. Hi, this is Olly. We met once when the rugby was on at Kira and G's.
Yeah.
Do you want to run a marathon with charity? And I think I got something
exactly.
I think I text back saying I'm Roy Keane.
Yeah.
As simple as that. There was no convincing needed.
Yeah, one meeting was enough. Very, very little convincing, is for reasons we're about to discuss, I guess. But so let's dig into that. What is it that led you, other than a random WhatsApp from a bloke you'd only just met? What is it that led you and Rosie to be involved with Marathons for Miracles and the Tommy's cause?
First of all, congratulations on your second child.
Thank you very much.
Second of all, your pit patter and rapport at the start of this podcast, you should think of a career change, I think. And it comes naturally.
Well, it's practice, I guess.
I suppose you've done 12 now, yeah.
We've done 12 now, yeah. So if I can't get that bit down. But no, thank you.
So Tommy's, I can't tell you exactly what Tommy's did during our period of grief, but I can tell you that they were present. So that is why, if I had the opportunity to support them back, I was going to take it with both hands.
Yeah.
And yeah, the reason why we're involved with Tommy's is because Rosie and I went through a child loss. I can't actually remember the exact weeks, but Rosie had to have a medical termination because the baby June, as we named her brain was not growing. Therefore, the risk of going full term was not one that the doctors recommended. So therefore, medical termination was recommended. And we had to go down that. And so obviously that was painful. Very, very, very painful. But the thing that compounded the issue was the physical and mental recovery post the procedure of the medical termination. So because there was the doctor's strike at the time, we had a choice at the time. You medically terminate via 2 routes. One was an operation, which should have been very, very clean, but there was a waiting list for it because the doctors were on strike. Or the second route was we deal with it and you deliver a baby the next week. And because the doctors were on strike, the waiting list was just ridiculous. So Rosie was like, bah, let's get it done so we can try and move on. And going down that route where she delivered baby June then caused, significant physical complications that did not get better. I want to say another 4 months of physical recovery, Rosie's side, before her body became reverted back to normal. So obviously receiving that news at the time and going through what you go through was shocking and horrendous, but then compound that with the physical and mental recovery and all the complications. You just made the whole thing an absolute, I don't know if you can swear on this, but an absolute SHIT show.
Yeah. No, that's fine.
So, yeah.
There's a lot to come. Start again. There's a lot to unpick there as ever. Firstly, sorry that you guys went through that. It always familiar emotions and very tough period, no doubt. Touching firstly on the sort of termination for medical reasons side, it's always a very difficult one to address because there's an element of choice.
Hope, choice,
well, hope,
whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
With mine and Amy's miscarriage, it was very much there's no heartbeat. This pregnancy isn't going to proceed, which is devastating in its own right. But it's just sort of nature taking its course. With the termination side of it, there's an element of choice there on your part. Like there's a decision to proceed or not to proceed. How did you guys find that, and how? I mean, an impossible situation to be in, is it?
Yeah, Rosie is incredibly practical when faced with big decisions.
Yeah.
And when faced with big decisions, she can rationalize really well. So yeah, you have a rational conversation and approach it rationally. And the baby, even if it went full term, it was not going to the rate the baby's brain was growing and the problems that baby June had, it wouldn't have been successful. So So whilst there was a choice, it's not really a choice at all because, the ultimately there wouldn't have been a baby June coming out. So you might have continued along with the pregnancy, but it was only going to go one way really.
Yeah, of course.
It would have been a miracle if it went full term, was sort of what the doctors advised.
And the doctors were sort of fairly clear cut about that, were they?
Yes, yeah. He was the only silver lining out of this was getting to meet people who were world class.
Yeah.
Adam Brooks. Yeah. The doctor's bedside manner was incredible, consultant, which was great. And then when Rosie eventually gave birth to our son, Felix, and that was a sticky situation that we got ourselves into. But again, the quality of the personnel at Adam Brooks helped make that smooth.
Because that's one thing. We were talking to Jenny a couple of weeks ago who went through a similar experience, and her experience was that the doctors made it reasonably clear that there was only one sensible path forward, but then kept just planting that seed of course, this is your choice and you don't have to do this if you don't want to. Whereas it sounds like there was perhaps a slightly more clear path set out for you guys, which is probably very helpful.
Yeah.
So then you're into delivery of the baby, which again, Amy and I went through at the Rosie. You're delivering June, who you know ultimately is not going to survive that process, which I found quite difficult as the bloke in that situation, because you're sitting next to your wife who's going through this, as you say, very intense physical process. It's labor at the end of the day. For knowing that the outcome's not going to be a positive one, how did you find that at the time, and how do you sort of reflect on that now? And perhaps that plays into that period of mental recovery that you mentioned before.
How do I find at the time? In answer to that question, absolutely mental.
Yeah.
How our hospital system has adjoining walls for women going through giving birth to dead babies, opposed to the wall on the opposite side. A woman was screaming because she was giving birth to an alive baby.
Oh, really?
So in terms of how it went down, just like I was just baffled, absolutely baffled that that has not been addressed.
Yeah.
In the hospital system, and then I guess the effects of going through that situation does not lend well to how envious and jealous you may be for a period of time afterwards, as you embrace your grief. So that certainly didn't help. But we were so wet behind the ears in terms of like what the next 5-6 months was going to entail that we went through that process. actually then the owners of the business I work for were over from Australia, half around the world. And I felt I needed a distraction or something else to think about. So I went off, and immediately after it happened, Rosie was looked after by her mum and dad at our place. I went off and did this meeting at work to show my face there to the owners. And in the moment, that's how I dealt with it, by sinking my teeth into a task, rightly or wrongly. Everyone deals with things differently.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, and then Rosie began her recovery, and we both began that journey together.
It's interesting what you said about having someone just through the wall, because that was one thing that we noted, which was a positive, is that we were on, I can't remember the layout in the delivery suite at Cambridge now, but we sort of felt like everyone else, as you walked in, everyone else went one way and we went the other way.
Okay.
And we had a little white, I seem to remember we had a little white feather on our door.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So that people coming in and out something knew what they were walking into.
Yeah.
But we did feel quite sort of secluded. But then I guess that just completely depends on the day and who's in and how many rooms they've got and how much space they've got, doesn't it? So it's sort of, it perhaps it has been thought about, but then that's perhaps just the nature of the NHS that you can't always act on your best laid plans. Given the circumstances of any particular day.
Yeah, it's not me burying the NHS.
No. But
it is me having a dig at like circumstance, and it could have been handled. I'm sure it could have been handled differently, because that noise in the alternate room was then moved eventually when I think they realised. So I actually think what you've just described in your experience, where you felt there was clear segregation, for whatever reason, that wasn't the case when we began our process. But that event in the room next door was moved on.
But as you say, exactly what you don't want at that time. Just is the period afterwards. You mentioned obviously there was a period of physical recovery for Rosie, which lasted perhaps longer than you had anticipated, or longer than the doctors had anticipated, or just hadn't necessarily explained quite what that would look like.
Yeah, so I'm going to risk putting my foot in it and reporting fake news, but effectively part of the labour was left inside Rosie, and had not been successfully given. Therefore, there kept being physical symptoms of, and not to be too graphic, bleeding, and heavily bleeding at all times of the day. So imagine that as a woman, having to deal with that.
No, it's terrifying, and especially when, and that paired with a period of, as you say, mental recovery and a grieving period, and you both trying to find ways to cope with the situation you're in. Did you find,
like, for example, I just had to compose myself. For example, waking up, Rosie scrubbing the carpet because she went for a wee, and on the way there was just a real mess, and that's just horrific. So that was nice,
because I guess it's that period of still recovering physically almost stops you from being able to draw a line in the sand almost, and then deal with the situation that's in front of you, and as you say, cope with it mentally. It keeps coming up in these conversations, but it's I think there's a perception of miscarriage that it's sort of, oh, okay, this baby's not going to make it, never mind, move on. And it's just not. And we've had now 13 variations on this conversation in one way, shape or form. None of them have been identical. I said at the start, it's an interesting one for me because our circumstances are quite similar, but actually they're not. I think the location and perhaps the timeline on the pregnancy, from what I remember from Amy and Rosie speaking, were not dissimilar, but the after effects and the process that you go through when you're there, and everyone's experience is very different, and they're all incredibly difficult in their own particular way.
Yeah, and then to not make it too insular, it's not just about what you and your wife or partner, whoever it may be, are going through. It's the impact of your immediate friends and family. Like, I know what we went through ruined my brother's and my sister-in-law's first pregnancy, because the two babies should have been born
Yeah.
within a week of each other, cousins.
Yeah.
And that what happened to us would have ruined what should have been a very happy time for them.
Yeah. Because they felt that they couldn't.
Well, I felt guilty, survivor's guilt. Felt anxious because would something happen to theirs? So yeah, real testing time.
And that's the other, it's the balancing act that we're having with this challenge and these sorts of conversations and the awareness that we're trying to raise.
Yeah.
We want people, you said yourself, you felt very wet behind the ears, I think was the phrase that you used, heading into that, not knowing what to expect, not knowing what could and might happen. We're obviously trying to change that and try and help people be more aware of the possibilities and therefore be a bit more prepared for it. But at the same time, we don't want to be doomsayers and create situations like what perhaps your brother and sister-in-law had, with then not enjoying pregnancy and not enjoying the process, because it is such a, as you know, and I know from having very fortunately been through successful pregnancies since, it's fantastic. It's the best thing it's ever happened to me. And we don't want to be telling people that it's not, and it's awful, and it's all going to go horribly wrong. But it's how do you strike that balance between enjoy it, but something might happen?
Yeah, cautious optimism is what the phrase we're coining for Rosie is. We're due again in, I say we, the royal we.
Yeah.
Second child coming in August, but with cautious optimism.
Talk about that a bit more. How, given what happened with June, and your experiences there, how is that framed? How did that frame your mindset going into the pregnancy with Felix? And then I guess, have you seen any differences between the pregnancy with Felix and the current one in your mind, given that obviously with Felix, your only previous experience was a negative one, whereas now you've got both a sort of a bad one and a good one. How do you reflect on that?
Yeah, so the Felix pregnancy was incredibly anxious, up until I'd say 16 weeks, maybe. Started to relax a bit more when you feel the baby kicking and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But in the lead up to that, we had so many extra scans because of what happened the first time. That I had
with the NHS or
I don't want to sound entitled, but no, we had to fork out for it.
Yeah.
Which is fine. Like, you want to do what's best for you, Rosie, and your baby. Bizarrely, all those tests were free on the NHS this time round.
Okay.
So we're in the system real early, and they're looking after us, which is great. And this time, naturally anxious with Felix. Anxiety sort of dwindled when you start feeling lots of movement, but then like the whole labour experience was a story in itself, particularly smooth. And then this pregnancy, absolutely no communication. I would have stayed silent till 12 weeks with everyone, but it wasn't possible because the time of year was over Christmas, and Rosie would participate in a few drinks, and it just looks so obvious if Rosie isn't having a party. So a few very, very immediate family cottoned on and realised then. So anxious up until 12 weeks. Then having to go back into the room where we were given the bad news at the Rosie for our 12-week scan with this baby was an experience. And Rosie certainly had forgotten like what the impact would be, and so that was an ordeal. Because all those memories come back, going back into that room where you were told there's a problem.
The same scan room, or it's
same scan room. That's right. Yeah. And then since then, with more and more scans comes more and more confidence. So, feeling in a cautiously optimistic place at the moment. Rosie's experience this time round in terms of symptoms been totally different. In terms of plenty of sickness, plenty of dietary cravings. She's eating like a 12-year-old boy, beige food, lots of chicken nuggets. But she's coming out the other side of that. She's starting to sleep well and not be sick as much. So, just a totally different physical experience for her as well, which we're told means a girl is on the way if you believe the wives' tales.
But it's I guess the the takeaway from that is it doesn't go away, does it? Like
No.
even when you get to a point where you feel you can be optimistic, it's still cautious. There's still
Yeah.
um,
And the labour's the thing is still to come. So we haven't even got our heads around that yet. So
yeah. Well, we similarly had quite a complicated birth with Poppy.
yeah.
So yeah, had the heading into the pregnancy with Rupert, had sort of the early stage anxiety because of the previous miscarriage, got through that, as you say, cautiously optimistic. And then as you get towards, as the optimism grows on the one end, sort of dread is perhaps a slightly strong word, but what's the word I'm looking for? Anxiety.
Yeah. Ominous, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Grows at the other end as he's survived. He's good. He's healthy. He's well. Now we've got to get him out. I guess as ever, the thing we're trying to find here is some learning of some sort, some advice for people listening who might have gone or be about to go through something similar. What's one thing that you wish you'd known heading into that first loss that you didn't? And then what's one thing that you feel that you and Rosie did as a couple that was good and that was sort of the key to not success, but to coping with that situation?
So I'll answer the second question first because I can't remember the first question. Something that Rosie and I did well was remained totally aligned and together. Yeah, when shit hits the fan and you got someone like that, you're doing all right.
I said this on a podcast that I did.
Yeah.
Not one that I was a guest on.
Mm.
Listen, the one best takeaway from the whole experience was that when we got to the other side of that, I knew that I was with the right person.
Yeah.
And at some point, as you say, the shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
And it's at that point, if you come through that and you're still solid and you feel like you coped with the bad stuff together rather than, Saturday afternoons going singing pub parties. Yeah. That's easy. To realise at that point that Amy was very much the one.
Yeah.
Beyond.
Yeah. I echo that completely. And then other things we did well. I think we just moved forward at our own pace together in our own different ways because they were very different.
Yeah.
And we were both okay with that.
When you said they were very different, how did your and Rosie's approach differ?
I went to work 5 days a week in the office. Rosie, I don't mean it in this way, Rosie over communicated with close friends and family. So they're two very different styles. Rosie connected with so many other stories and people that had suffered. So yeah.
Which is obviously what we're trying to do. But is putting those stories out there for people to be able to connect with. So if only we'd existed then. But but do you? I guess without this wanting to sound like a criticism, Rosie's approach would be sort of seemingly the recommended approach. Talk to people, seek help, seek connection. Yours more the typical male approach, which I can relate to. Throw yourself into what feels familiar, what you can control, circumstances that are less volatile. Do you, a couple of years down the line, do you feel that you might have done something differently at that time? Did it work for you?
Yeah, it worked. Yeah, it worked for me. But you could say it hasn't worked because you asked me off air, have I listened to any of these podcasts? And my answer is no, because don't want to listen to all that misery, basically. Yeah, I say that flippantly, and I don't mean it sound flippant.
Not emotionally ready, I think, were the words that you used to me.
So reflecting back, we got through it together, and we're still together, and we've got a great son and another one on the way. So I'd say, job done.
It worked.
Yeah, and other things we did. We went to social events out of our comfort zone, i.e., very soon after we were at a wedding in Lake Garda to this guy who Rosie knew through work. We were periphery guests. There's the term periphery guests.
Yeah, I know.
We
What
were
you mean.
like periphery guests on steroids.
Yeah.
In terms of that. So it was great going into a situation like that where you knew no one and you could just be Rosie and Finn, the couple from Cambridge, who Rosie was this guy's lawyer. Like
Yeah.
that was an easy and a nice thing to do for 4 days, and being in Lake Garda is obviously nice as well.
Mm. Bit of escapism.
So yeah, little things like that, and yeah, throw ourselves into work, talking to charities like Tommy's, were great actually to get on the phone too, and then
So Rosie sort of accessed those phone lines. Both of you.
I
Or?
actually can't remember. I do remember myself through my work and my health insurance scheme having access to a facility that I did initially. So yeah, it's a bit of both on that one. And then just the other thing that we did really well was sometimes we just let it consume us
Mm.
and like reveled in how painful it was. And I think you need to do that to a degree as well.
Was Kieran I was speaking to last week who said exactly the same thing. And I agreed with them that it sort of went through an initial week or so of, again, perhaps a typical male response of there's a problem, I need to try and fix it. How can I fix it? What can I do?
Yeah.
And we both agreed last week that this success came when we got to the point where we realized that actually there's nothing that you can do. And sometimes you do just need to sit on the sofa for 2 hours staring at the wall and just be and allow it to happen.
Can you believe, right, there is actually a book out there that advises you how to deal with this as a male? I got given this book. I think Holly gave it us through someone else that she knew.
Okay.
And that literally the first bloody page was, do not say, well, at least we can get pregnant. Right?
Yeah.
Which I had said. You can laugh about it now, but like it just goes back to what I've said previously about being wet behind the ears, and then to the male response of just trying to think rationally about it.
Yeah.
Because it had taken us longer than we'd expected to get the first pregnancy. So they're flipping on its head and trying to, in a male way, respond rationally. That was the first thing that came out of me.
Yeah.
So thanks, Holly, for that book.
Yeah, I think the way I've framed it since is that good news is good news and bad news is bad news. And that seems very, very oversimplification, but the two don't necessarily need to intersect all the time. Like you don't have to try and use the bad news. Sorry, you don't have to try and use the good news to make the bad news better or the bad news to make the good news worse. Like they can both exist in their own lanes. And it sort of then it comes on to and sort of when you're looking at the situation with your brother. Was it your brother or Rosie's brother?
My brother, yeah.
Your brother.
Who's doing the run with us.
Yeah. Very difficult to do when you're in the moment, but how can you try it? Their good news is still good news.
Yeah.
And bad news was obviously bad news, but they don't necessarily, it's how can you find a way for the one not to taint the other or vice versa. And it's a very difficult thing to do, but that's sort of how I try and frame it these days.
Yeah.
You mentioned there your brother's going to be running with us. Tell us about your running journey, Fen, because there's something that you slipped in on WhatsApp a couple of months ago, which I wasn't aware of, but you've got a bit of pedigree, but it perhaps hasn't stood you in good stead for this challenge.
The pedigree is nothing to do with running for 4 hours. The pedigree is chasing an egg.
Yeah.
Very averagely for about a decade.
I'd say better than average.
Was a rugby player for nearly a decade, had to retire through injury. And then, again, another piece of adversity in your life, dealing with the fallout of being a professional rugby player and then going to work in an office environment with some of those personalities that you meet in an office environment is mental. Going from professional rugby sport to that. Yeah. And that hit hard with me. Just snuck up on me and then hit me hard. And the way I dealt with that wasn't great. And my mum and Rosie helped massively dig me out of that hole. My mum specifically getting me into triathlon, which is where I developed a love for endurance sports since exiting rugby. So I would say zero pedigree running, particularly some of your the pedigree of some of your other legs, like
Yeah.
Tommy, Cheshire, the Cheshire leg.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm hoping I can trundle round with you. Yeah, absolutely.
We'll be fine. Trundling is my forte. I've always said, even from my sort of rowing days, I've got a diesel engine, not a petrol engine.
Yeah,
So
no. Yeah,
I'll keep chugging along, but it's never particularly pretty. But so how's the training gone? How are you finding it?
Monotonous. Yeah, monotonous. And it is not hard. I think you said it enough there. It is not hard on your lungs whatsoever. Your feet just become so full of, like, they just become like these numb instruments that you're pounding into the ground. And at some point you're like, they're so numb. You're like, have I even got feet still? I have managed a 30-kilometer run in the snow without any routes. So just literally running around for 30 kilometers tracked on the watch without any food or drink.
Okay.
And it snowed and rained. And because I did that, I am backing myself to do this marathon.
Okay, good. It's a different approach. I said everyone's experience of Loft was different. Everyone's experience of marathon, it's also
I wanted to really test myself before the leg, and that was my test. If I can do 30 kilometers without food or drink in the snow and rain, then I will be able to do what Ollie needs me to do on the day.
Are you planning to do it without food and drink on the day?
No.
Good. I'm glad, because that's the only silver lining to all these marathons, is how much I get to eat.
So that is, again, something perhaps for off air, but the logistics with you about where my old man has put his hand up to meet us places on a bike with stuff to feed us. And so we can pick
sausage
up
rolls. Sausage rolls are my go-to.
Wow, meat mid-run. That is bold.
Absolutely. I have a carb electrolyte mix that I put in my backpack, in my bladder, in my camelback. So that is both my water source, but it's also a source of carbs. But it means that everything's just a little bit sweet.
Yes.
So by the time I've been just sipping away at that for 3 hours, and the odd jelly baby in like a brunch bar.
Well, I tell you what, Ollie, I could give you Felix was developing he loves eating sweet porridge, like porridge and milk with berries and all that sort of stuff in it, with yogurt and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we've now started making him savoury porridge.
Okay.
So that's peas and sweet corn with water and porridge oats and cottage cheese. So I could quite happily introduce you to one of his diet favourites.
How's he getting on with that?
He absolutely loves it.
Does he? Interesting. I'll see about that one. Don't knock it till you've tried it. And whereabouts are we going?
I mean, if I was in charge of the route, which we're going to do this collaboratively, as I understand, Henry, but if I was in charge of the route, I would take us from the Rosie Hospital to the nearest park, which is under 1 kilometre away. I would probably do about 20 laps of that park.
Yeah.
I would then travel, it's about 3 kilometres to the next park and do another 10 laps.
Yeah.
And then I'd take us into town, see some sights, and then down to Granchester. So what I would like to do is get the body of the run done, the monotonous stuff done, and the volume of that kilometres outside of town and seeing some night stuff.
Yeah.
Head into town, get the buzz of people seeing sights, and the home stretch to Granchester is how I think I would like to run the day. Yeah.
I think that's where we're going to end up. Fen, for context, this is knees related, isn't it?
It's my body is made of glass related, and the pounding. I've just got so much respect for when I describe this challenge to people. It's not about me completing a marathon. It's about helping you. I cannot believe what you're doing through your body through it, having done the low level training that I've done. And then on top of that, I just can't, how impressive professional runners are. It's just their bodies are just set up for it. Yeah.
They're absolutely nuts.
So it's my body's made of glass. I want to avoid tarmac, in answer to your question, and something with a bit of give.
Well, I think we've got a good happy medium. I can't bring myself to just do laps of parks, but we're going to do a bit of that. But also we're largely sticking to riverbanks. I think in and around Cambridge, where there's always a grass option not too far away. But it'll be great to start off at the Rosie. This is the hospital, not the wife. For those who
I referred to as Adam Brooks earlier.
Yeah, the Rosie is the maternity hospital at Adam Brooks at Cambridge, where Finn and Rosie will hopefully by the end of the year had both of their children, and where Amy and I had our first and our miscarriage prior to that. So a poignant starting point, should we say, and then a tour of Cambridge finishing out at Granchester, which would be really nice. And given both your and our links to Cambridge, I think we're going to have quite a turnout.
Yes.
Plenty of support and a few extra runners. So I've got a couple on my side who I think are going to come and run with us, not for the whole thing, but for
fantastic,
perhaps 10K each.
Fantastic.
And you've got your brother, you mentioned.
Yeah, so I was one of these. I got my brother, my best mate, my brother, Ferg,
Nice.
And then I was one of these modern men that couldn't pick one best man at my wedding. I had 3. So one of those best men, Tom Littlewood, will be doing it as well. Tom is just always there.
Yeah,
he's that guy,
and they're both aiming for the full shift.
I think so. I'm not putting them under pressure. I know my brother is, but I'm not going to message Tom saying just checking. Because he's already nervous around the fact that you are doing 39 and 39 weeks. Therefore, this is going to be a marathon that's going to be done in X time. Whereas I've assured him that it's not about that.
No,
this is a bit of crack.
We're not
running for 40 odd kilometers, raising awareness for charity.
Yeah. Absolutely. Which worth mentioning that you and Rosie have very much done. Your fundraising page has been a resounding success so far, and will no doubt sort of continue to build into the day itself.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that took me back. The level of support financially from other people. Yes, I did time my release very close to Christmas when people are feeling giving. That was rather devious of me. However, just totally blown away by the level of support, particularly by work colleagues. I was very surprised about that. And then I wasn't surprised how many messages I had, direct messages I've had since about their experiences. That didn't surprise me, but it helped me understand that person more.
Yeah.
At work and their whole life situation. So that was positive from the situation.
Yeah. And we've seen so much of that where just by putting your own story out into the world, you sort of give people that. It's almost like an invitation to people to then reach out and share their own experiences. And I think that can only be a good thing. And certainly the donations that will go to Tommy's are a fantastic thing.
Absolutely.
Finn, thank you so much. As ever, not easy times to look back on and to remember and to reflect on, but thank you very much for doing so. We're really looking forward to being back in Cambridge and to seeing you guys and seeing a lot of other people and seeing some old sites. And I'm sure it's going to be a fantastic day out, regardless of how many laps of Parker's Piece we end up doing or not.
Excellent. And in all seriousness, you should consider a career change. How you handled this podcast and the linking between questions and moving the conversation along. I probably would have been stuck at the first question for 45 minutes had you not.
There've been hints that we might carry this podcast on after the challenge is finished in some way, shape, or form. But possible. Kieran and I came up with an idea for a podcast last week called. It was going to be called something like "Don't try and guess what they're thinking," like a men's reflection on dealing with their wives. But that's very much. I would. Yeah, we'll get you on as a guest perhaps as well.
Oh God.
Very good, Finn. Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure, and we'll see you in Cambridge.
See you soon. Cheers.
Thanks a lot. All the best.
Thank you. Bye.